G'day everyone, welcome to the Outback Packers podcast, the podcast where two mates from all the way across the world have a yarn talking Packers football and the green and gold. I'm Nick Gregory with my co-host Joe Pearson, as always, today joined by the co-host of Cheesehead Radio, CD Angeli. How are you, Angeli?
Oh, fantastic, guys. How are you guys doing?
Been better, but
Yeah.
I'm glad I got great company here to talk about the win with and kind of therapize myself a bit.
It's definitely a rough Monday because it's not a victory Monday, or I guess now it's Tuesday, but it's kind of rough. I'm glad we're having this group therapy session. It might help
Yeah.
out a little bit.
Black
Yeah,
Monday.
the yarn is kind of tangled. It's yeah, this isn't a good. This is going to be a rough yarn.
It's yeah, most definitely. I think I just want to kind of start the show by addressing the big event that's kind of happened in the NFL the past 7 days, the Damar Hamlin thing. Pretty intense injury. I'm sure we've all kind of seen it. Me and Joe have discussed it on this show last week. It's really nice to see that he's kind of like officially out of the hospital as of today, and he was celebrating the win with the team. Apparently, he was setting off all the alarms in the hospital when he was celebrating the kick return by Naheem Hines for the touchdown. So yeah, it's really really nice to see him recover so quickly, and it's what was a free accident. So nice to see it. Such a nice turnaround.
Yeah, it's great to see him back and healthy, and making the recovery. I know the doctors are pretty surprised that he is getting back to normal pretty quick. I know they're going to still be monitoring him for stuff and that, but it's great to see somebody. Well, I guess I would consider him young. CD would probably consider him young, but he's probably an old man to you, Nick.
It's basically my grandfather, 22 years old. Oh god.
But it's great to see that he's getting back and better, and once he gets the checks clear, cleared, I would love to see him back on the field and playing what he wants, playing the game that he loves. And I did see that the Bills did something classy with his contract, that they there was something in it that if he missed certain amount of times it would lower his salary, but they did away with that and they're paying him his full salary on the contract. So that's a great thing. Um, I just want to say one thing, and then CD can have, we can hear from CD, but I really want to call out the Steelers, and I can't think of the two players right off the top of my head, but I did see a video from their game yesterday where there was a player that, I don't know, and made the tackle or whatever, and he was on the ground, and one of the other players came over and fake was doing CPR to him. I thought that was a little bit classless. Uh, we need to do better, guys. I mean, it would be a lot different if Damar didn't almost die, but we can't be doing that kind of stuff. So let's do a little bit better.
For
And
sure.
luckily, I think that was a rarity. When you look at the outpouring from nearly every NFL stadium all weekend. I was at the Packer game on last night or Sunday night, and I was sitting right on the 30-yard line. And so the entire game, I
Nice.
was able to look and see the outlined blue around the three, which I saw in almost all the NFL stadiums that I watched this weekend. It's just neat to see a whole community come together. And I think that was wonderful for all of us to see that, you know what, hey, we're good at division, especially in this country, Nick. I'll tell you about that sometime. We can divide ourselves in amazing ways. But something like this really brings you together as human beings and transcends the game and then becomes a part of it. So I thought that was really, really cool. And luckily, the thing you just mentioned with the Steelers, that's definitely the exception and not the rule.
Definitely, and I completely agree. It was great seeing players wearing the Love Demar shirts, and I didn't see the outlines because I didn't get to watch a lot of the game. I had to listen to Wayne and Larry on the radio call, which doesn't hurt my feelings because I love listening to those guys. But I did see pictures of like the Packers putting the thing on the Tron about support Demar, and we love Demar and stuff like that. So I thought that was great, and it is. It's a singularity, but I still think that somebody needs to sit down and talk to those two guys from the Steelers and say, hey, It would have been different if it wasn't such a serious issue, but let's kind of be mindful. And I never did look at Twitter to see if maybe somebody apologized or whatever, but and they're all young guys, so they're just reacting and thought they were making a cute joke or whatever, but really it's not the time. Too soon, as
Sure.
they would
Yeah.
say. Too soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now that I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and this is kind of the last thing I want to talk about quickly is before we get into the actual game. Black Monday, the first kind of Monday after the NFL season, we're kind of seeing the first firings of the season. Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim out literally just, not even a full season after getting extensions from their contracts. And Lovie Smith was fired literally like 30 minutes after his exit conference, in which he said that he expected to be back. So not a great look for the Texans. And, the Cardinals has been kind of like a big, flaming pile of trash for the past like 3 years. So it's kind of just like, I think a long time coming. I'm surprised Steve Keim is actually out because he's been there for almost 10 years now, or I think actually at 10 years as the GM somehow. But yeah, how do you guys feel about these coach openings?
I think there was a little bit of out of the office type things for Steve Keim too, because I've heard that he got picked up a couple different times for DUI and
that was last year.
kind
DUI
of things
and
like
suspended.
That. So yeah, that one, even though he was there a while, it doesn't really surprise me that they decided to finally move on. Kingsbury, other than the contract they gave him, it really didn't surprise me either because he's pretty stale in the NFL. Maybe he can catch on I know the big speculation that I've been seeing is being that he's spent time with the Patriots, that maybe Belichick will bring him in as a coordinator or something. But I think the best course for him is probably to go back to college because that's where he had his bigger successes. Lovey, what do you say about Lovey? That poor guy can't catch a break for nothing. I just don't think the Texans are a good fit for him. I think his best bet is either to go back to college or take a coordinator position more than it is to actually be a head coach right now because he can't catch a break on anything. I haven't seen any other head coaches gone, but I do know the Browns did fire their defensive coordinator.
Right, I didn't say that. Yeah,
I can't think of what his name is, so they'll be in the hunt for a defensive coordinator. I know there's a lot of other teams that are speculated as getting rid of their coaches. Like I've heard the biggest shock would be I almost called them San Diego, but it's the Chargers. They're rumored to be moving on from what's his name, Brandon Staley. And obviously the Raiders are rumored to be moving on from McDaniels after 1 year, which doesn't surprise me because I don't think McDaniels is that great of a coach. But it's kind of surprising they call it Black Monday and we really didn't get a Black Monday. We got like a trickle. So
great Monday.
Yeah, great Monday. But really so far no big surprises to me.
Yeah. And for you, CD, how do you feel?
Well, I just think it's a great early Black Monday because now all these playoff teams have pressure on them. I mean, the Packers went through that last year with Nathaniel Hackett and all the rumors as you're trying to focus on the games and trying to focus on the playoffs. Like, oh, which offensive coordinator are we going to steal? So that's where some of these storylines will come in. Like most of these guys, I don't care about them. But the fact is now you got NFL teams with openings, and who are they going to poach? So that's kind of the secondary, headline that goes through the rest of the playoffs here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think the big thing, and it mixes into our Packer coverage, and we'll get to the game here in a minute, but the big thing coming out of LaFleur's press conference is when he was asked if they would be moving on from Joe Barry, and LaFleur said that he doesn't expect any changes of his coaching staff, and I think we're all kind of gritting our teeth here. Was it just he doesn't want to say that he's on the block, or is he really going to stick with Joe Barry for the next season?
I hope not. It's one of those things where I think you kind of like which I'll talk about here a little bit later once we get into the game. But I think settling for mediocrity in a franchise where championships are the expectation. I think a lot of us, we kind of laugh at how the Vikings celebrate that divisional win this year. For the Packers, that's kind of not even really a thought for a lot of the season. I think, it's a franchise that we should be expecting, to be fighting for the best in the league in a lot of these categories. And Joe Barry's defense was good in that last final stretch, but also the teams that they faced were the Rams with Baker, who had been in house for a week, the Bears, the Dolphins, where Tua had a concussion for the whole second half, and the Vikings, who was like, which looks like the one good game, which you have to give them credit, but it's you can't hedge your bets for another season and what they think is going to be all in based on that 4 game stretch.
I don't put anything past Matt LaFleur here. He's loyal to a fault, and
Yeah,
I don't know. We'll get into when we talk about the game a little bit more, and maybe
yeah,
stuff like that. But yeah, I don't totally believe. We were all saying it after the Vikings game. Was this enough for Joe Barry to keep his job? 1 game out of 16. I'm like, I hope not. But you're only as good as your last game, so maybe
yeah.
that kind of solidified a decision for him. But I guess we'll
Yeah,
see as the offseason rolls.
the one word he kept using in his press conference that scared the hell out of me was continuity, because
Yeah.
that just
Yeah,
means I don't see a lot of turnover happening on the roster and on the coaching staff, just from him continuing to say continuity. It's like, oh, come on, Matt. You can't
yeah.
be this blind to see that there's got to be some kind of change. But hey, they pay him the big money, so let's let him and Goody figure that one out.
Yeah. Well, I think, look, I think we're all kind of ready to get into this game, so let's talk about it. I mean, first of
I really
all,
don't want to talk about the game.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I,
I mean,
I, I
first,
I haven't cried enough over this game yet, so it's too soon. Too soon. We just talked about this. Too soon.
it's absolutely a tender spot. I kind of made a joke that this last stretch was supposed to be like a de facto playoff run, and that really felt like the past couple of playoff games that we kind of finished with the past 3 seasons. I mean, the lack of effort in some spots and kind of the inopportune turnovers, the fumbles, the offense stalling, and it just kind of felt like all too familiar. You kind of all knew how this was going to go after that the start of the third quarter there, I think.
Well, I like the famous philosopher said, it was like deja vu all over again, because it did, like you said, it just seemed like the same thing that we dealt with the last few years in the playoffs. Aaron Jones with a fumble at the wrong time, Rodgers throwing a pick at the wrong time, receivers deciding that they can't catch the ball at the wrong time, the defense deciding they can't stop anybody. It just, I don't know. It's deja vu all over again.
I think what you saw was really just a series of mental laziness, mental mistakes. We saw the potential of this team against the Vikings. There's a lot of people like to say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, the Packers don't have the talent." Well, we had a lot of talent against the Vikings. We looked great against the Vikings. If we max out our talent and don't make mental mistakes, look what we can do. And this game just came against the Lions, and you just saw it. I mean, it wasn't. And some, like you said, some of the mistakes were glaring. The interception, the fumble, Quay Walker, Razul Douglas, but a lot of them were just you're not in position, and Goff is completing these just dinky little 5 yard passes for first downs. I'm like, get in position. What are you doing? And that's the deja vu that I see. It's just they're just mentally were not in the game as it appeared they could have been earlier in the season.
Well, and I kind of tweeted this just after the game too, that why is it a common theme this year and some of last year that the Packers can only play a half? You know, because they looked good at the first half. The defense was holding, you know, the Lions to, a single field goal. they did later on get a second field goal, but they were holding them down. Now the offense wasn't scoring, but they were still at least driving down the field and giving the defense a rest. But then the second half came and they fell apart. Like you said, it was like mental laziness that they just weren't out there. Oh well, we've done enough, we don't have to do anymore. And that's just been a common theme throughout this whole year and somewhat last year too.
Yeah, I think like kind of like we just talked about, like the continuity thing. I really hope they get a chance to actually make some kind of changes. I think this roster is going to be very, very different next year. So I think it's going to be very tough to kind of extrapolate what we're seeing from this season into next season. But I do have faith in Matt LaFleur as a coach, but we all kind of know how, like the coaching decisions and things like that, like with his staff, it's going to be kind of interesting to see what happens. Um,
I,
like,
I think I know what we need to do. I really do. And just go with me here for a minute, guys.
uh,
I think we need to go up to Lambeau and hold a seance and bring Vince Lombardi back to take over the body of Matt LaFleur and get him to kick somebody's ass, because I think that's really what this team needs, is somebody to kick their ass and say, hey, stop with the stupid mistakes. It's not just Quay, it's not just Razul, it's just, you know, uh, I was listening to Game on Wisconsin's Final Dump earlier, and one of the things that Brendan was talking about was the AJ Dillon drop. That was an easy pitch and catch
Mm-hmm.
that could have got them a first down. It might not have led to a score or anything, but it was just a simple error that there was nobody around him. There was no need to worry about anything. Just make the catch, secure the ball, get up the field. Or the Romeo Dobbs play. It bounced right off his forearm. There should have been no reason he couldn't catch that ball. So it just these simple mistakes that I think, and don't get me wrong, I love Matt LaFleur. I think he is a good coach. I just think he needs to bring in somebody who's going to be that ass kicker to, get the attitude back into this team. And I know we've talked about this a lot in our episodes, but I don't mind Jair talking, because I think that fires up the team a little bit. Let him talk, let him jaw, let him do all this stuff, because it seems like the other players respond to it, and then they start getting an attitude and getting a swagger to them and start playing different. So if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I don't care. Hire some guy off the street to just come in and be a motivational speaker, or to literally kick one of them in the ass and say, do your job properly or whatever. But, I don't know. I really don't. It's going to be a long off season. That's all I can say.
yeah, I think for me, the story of this season regarding kind of like the roster was just that the regression from both sides of the ball. And I think I don't know if either you guys like listen to much what Ben Fennell writes and talks about. He kind of mentioned early on in the season that he wasn't sure how confident he was in a lot of these offensive players, and he kind of pointed out guys like John Runyon and Josh Myers and Josiah Aguirre, Robert Tunyon, and at first I kind of like brush those thoughts off, because I was like, of course they're great NFL players, but I think in these kind of games where it gets really physical and it kind of becomes that gritty in the trenches, like you have to really just rely on your players to kind of come up in these big moments. I think we kind of see it time and time and again. The players who are kind of inconsistent. Someone like Josh Myers, who is very like, he's good when he's good, but a lot of the time it's like 50-50 percentage of like what you're getting is good or terrible. And even though there was some like bright spots, you have like John Runyon threw Aiden Hutchinson like past Josh Nyman for a free sack in the middle of the game on a crucial third down. I think I would like to see a lot of like bolstering of this roster of players who are just straight up good, not who players who are like, oh, they can be good for us in a certain spot, or they can kind of do this thing well. But you need players who you can rely on. And I think a lot of this regression we've seen this season on both sides of the ball is this kind of like relying on players who are just good enough or can kind of like fill in the gap for now? Where are you guys at with that?
I don't know, CD. You go ahead. I'm going to formulate my thought real quick.
Well, if you followed me on Twitter or even listened to Cheesehead Radio, you know that I've been strongly critical of Brian Gutekunst for kicking the can down the road. And we are just stuck in a situation right now where our salary cap situation, we have so much money now. I mean, we have the highest paid quarterback and highest paid offensive tackle. We now have the fifth highest paid guard, highest paid defensive lineman, highest paid cornerback. You can't keep having the highest paid person at all these positions in the league and think you're going to have all these also quality starters at every other position. You got to bring in. You have to every one of those guys. You got to balance out with like five guys on their first contract. So yeah, the depth issue has gotten progressively worse ever since Roger signed that first contract, and we decided to keep doing this stuff with Bakhtiari and Jair and etc. As you said, Nick, there's going to be some big changes next year to the roster, and the people that are leaving, potentially Alan Lazard, potentially Mason Crosby, potentially some of these other free agents we can talk about later. We're not going to replace them with some veteran free agent coming in from another team. They're going to be replaced with draft picks and undrafted free agents. So the situation is going to continually decline as long as the salary cap structure is kind of in place. That's just my feeling on it. Sorry to be negative, but that's
No, for sure.
just kind of the reality
I totally
we're
agree.
dealing with.
Yeah, I completely agree too that there was really no way around it either, because let's face it, and I know this is going to sound weird to Nick because I've defended him a lot this year, but let's face it, we let Aaron Rodgers call the shots too much lately. Well, I want my best friend back, so the Packers went and got Cobb back. Well, I couldn't see myself without Bakhtiari, blocking my blind side. So, which I can't blame them for signing Bakhtiari, because before the knee injury, the guy was most likely, in my opinion, the best left tackle in the league. He had his struggles in maybe the run game a little bit, but he was the best pass blocking left tackle in the league. And I know I'm not the only one. There's some other ones out there, but I think the Packers would have won the Super Bowl had he not tore his ACL before the Tampa Bay game. So that one is, and who would have thought that he would have been out for 2.5 years with said injury? Otherwise, we wouldn't even be considering anything with him. We would just, hey, he's been great. He's going to stay out there, even if we move on from Rodgers, and he's a great cornerstone to have for when Love takes over. The Jair one, kind of the same thing. When Jair's been healthy, outside of a few plays here or there, or maybe a game or two here or there, but I get what you're saying, where they don't all need to be the highest paid player in the league. But I think that's what the league is moving towards. And I think if I'm trying to figure out how to word this, I think everybody's trying to bank on the media money that'll be coming in down the road. You got the big YouTube deal that just came in. You're going to have rights being signed, contracts being signed in a couple of years for this or that. And I think everybody's trying to bank on that money coming in. Well, they were banking on it a little too much. Then COVID hit, and the salary cap went down the drain. So you can't always bank on it. And I think that right there hurt the Packers more than anything, was banking on that money and then the COVID year. Because that was the year before the COVID year. Was we signed Zadarius, we signed Preston, we signed Billy Turner, we signed this one, we signed that one. And they just went on this spending spree thinking, okay, well, we're going to have a bunch of money coming in. We're good. Forget about it. We're good. And so, yeah, pushing the can down the road didn't help out at all. But I'd hate to see what this team would be like had we not kept a lot of the players we did. What would our secondary look like had we not kept Jair? What would the second, what would the offensive line be like had we not kept Bakhtiari? Or I'll be honest, and Nick knows this pretty good, that I was firmly in the belief that Elton Jenkins wouldn't be back. I thought he would even get traded before the trade deadline just to move the contract, just because of how they drafted in this last draft, and with Elton being a little bit of an older you draft pick when they drafted him, that I think his age and the money that he was going to command, that they were just going to move on from him. But I don't know. They've got to have a plan somewhere. Let's hope Russ Ball has a little bit more magic in his bag and we can get some stuff figured out, because there's no way we can go in next year with the players that we have and make another run at it.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of like I think we're all kind of in agreement here. You know, I think that the franchise was put really in an impossible situation. It was really like the front office versus Rodgers, and Rodgers bet on himself, and he won. You know, to his credit, he won 2 back-to-back MVPs. And when you're in that position as the general manager, it's very hard to justify to the fan base and the community that you're not going to re-sign, you know, the back-to-back MVP. And because they literally had plans in place to replace him, and you know I think that Jordan Love has future somewhere in the league as a good player, but it's very difficult to justify moving on from Rodgers, especially to Matt LaFleur, who has a great relationship with him by all accounts. You know, it's kind of just like an impossible situation, and I think if Rodgers, even if he just didn't win the second MVP, I don't think that he would have been back kind of this season. It's just such a, because they didn't. I think I think they got caught in between moving on from Rodgers and kind of being forced into keeping him, because this season kind of was their planned rebuilding year. You know, I think the fact that they continued to kick the can down the road this year was quite surprising to a lot of people, myself included. It's just this franchise is in such a strange spot because historically they haven't been like this, right? I mean, and Gutekunst literally, learned a lot of his knowledge about general managing under Ted Thompson. I kind of, it's such it's an interesting spot because this is like an unprecedented time in at least modern Packers history where we're not really sure what's next. And I think this off season is going to be extremely pivotal, for forming the future of this team.
Well, I got 2 things to kind of say here. One's a statement and followed by a question, and it kind of goes with what, kind of what we're talking about. The game plus a little bit of the contract stuff. You know, I do want to say congratulations to Jamal Williams for getting his first career 1,000-yard game. Or, I mean, 1,000-yard year, 1,000-yard game. What the hell am I talking about?
1,000-yard game.
And then didn't he get the highest touchdowns for a Lions player in a season? So right. So that's wonderful. Couldn't be a better guy to for that to happen to. Which leads to my question: did we keep the wrong running back? Would we have been better off keeping Jamal Williams and moving on from Aaron Jones, or did we? I use the royal we because I am a Packer owner, so I can say this. Did they, should they have moved on from Jones and kept Jamal, or were they right in keeping Jones and letting Jamal walk? Now, let me preference this saying I love both the guys. I've met both guys. I actually have met Aaron Jones's mom. Great people. I love them to death. I'd hate to see them on another team. But, seeing how Jamal's played and some of the key fumbles that Aaron's had at, some inopportune times, would we have been better off in an opposite situation?
See, you want to go first?
Well, I think that was part of the Packers' plan because they had drafted AJ Dillon, not AJ Dillon, sorry, yeah, God.
See, you're doing the same thing I'm doing.
I know exactly. They drafted Quadzilla, and like everyone kind of freaked out. They're like, "Why are we drafting another running back when we already have two running backs?" But it was clear that Dillon was there to replace Williams. Now, if you were going to keep Jones, you would have drafted a different running back that would have been more of that style. Because you couldn't get rid of Jones and then have both Quadzilla and Williams because they're both very similar styles running back. They're both power straight ahead runners. So yeah, that would have been one thing you'd have to draft differently for that. But I don't know. I just think Aaron Jones is just such a dynamic runner. I'm actually disappointed in how the Packers have used him and how little
Right.
they've used him. He should be mentioned in the same breath as Emmett Smith and some of the greats if they were really utilizing him to his full strengths. Warwick Dunn, that type of back who could really, you know, get you 1,000 yards on the ground and then probably another 700, 800 through the air. But he's not doing that, and it's too bad. But I don't know that may end up being the legacy of this whole decision is that we probably had a guy who could have been a top 20, 30 running back, potential Hall of Fame esque running back that may not get that now. So it's too bad.
It is. Nick, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I. It's funny because I remember that off season, I was actually on the team of keeping Jamal Williams and drafting another running back to replace Aaron Jones later on. It's funny because on Jamal Williams' own team, he wasn't even the preferred running back going into the season. They wanted to ride DeAndre Swift kind of, and their backfield actually is really kind of a mirror of the Packers' backfield because DeAndre Swift is a very Aaron Jones esque kind of slicing running back, however you want to phrase that, lightning and thunder kind of thing. If it was me, I wouldn't have drafted AJ Dillon at all, at least that high, and I would have drafted a receiver maybe in the second round, maybe a thought. And I think that Aaron Jones is undoubtedly the better player, perhaps a little bit less reliable or safe, maybe in some situations. Jamal Williams is like he's got glue on his gloves at all times. I think he has like 3 career fumbles or something like that. I just think the Aaron Jones signing was kind of like indicative of just one of those all-in moves where you can't just re-sign a guy for 1 year. So I think they kind of decided to re-sign him for that 3 or 4 year contract. And I think they're just trying to keep the game together, and it hasn't really worked out. So I think it's kind of hard to justify the signing at this point. But he's a guy who's like extremely talented. His career yards per carry average is over 5 yards, I think, and
Yeah.
he's a perennial Walter Payton Man of the Year candidate. He's a fantastic person. I think everyone's happy that he's on the team. As a fan, I'm kind of like I'm indifferent. But if I was running the show, I would have done it very differently.
And it kind of surprises me that CD said that Aaron Jones had the potential to be a Hall of Fame worthy running back because I mean I see that he's special too. I really I saw it a lot of it. Matter of fact, when they drafted Jamal and then they drafted Aaron and then they drafted Devontae Mays, the two running backs out of that group that I thought that was going to be on the team that were going to be the biggest you know what's the word biggest stat biggest impact. There you go.
Mhm.
We're gonna be Aaron Jones and Devontae Mays. I wasn't the biggest fan of Jamal Williams coming out. I saw what he was. Like CD said, that he was a little bit of a straight line runner, that pound the yardage and whatever, and maybe could help out in the receiving, the passing game. And then I looked at Devontae Mays as somebody who is going to be that all around bag. And then I saw Aaron Jones being the Packers' Darren Sproles. So I kind of put Jones in the Sproles mold just because they're similar sizes and all that. But I also saw that he could be that little bit of everything. He could be that slot guy. He could be that running back. He could be a kick returner. He could be a punt returner. And I just saw all the things that they could use him for. So, but then when they got into playing and they released Mays and it was Jamal and Aaron, you could see it in Jamal that maybe fit the system a little bit better than what Aaron did. Aaron was the better player, but I thought Jamal maybe fit into the systems a little bit better. So I think that's where my question kind of came from. Was I think in my mind the way they used their running backs, I thought Jamal could be the more impactful guy for LaFleur's offense than what Aaron does, and it's just kind of a weird little question that you think of when you're using your hindsight. That would we have been better off with Jamal, or are we better off with Aaron? So that's a little bit inside to my thought process on that. It's
Yeah, no,
scary,
I
trust
feel
me.
you.
I
I
know.
feel you for sure.
Aaron Jones is averaging 5.3 yards a carry this
Yes.
season.
Yeah.
That's the most of any running back, but he has only like, I don't know, like 213 actual carries. I mean, he only averages like 50 something yards a game. And I mean, you compare that to the Josh Jacobses, who are getting, the massive amount of yardage. And, what if they were feeding him that much? What if he was getting those carries? What if he
Right.
was being utilized? How many games do we scratch our head and say, why are we not even handing the ball off to Aaron Jones? He only had like 3 carries in the whole game. How many games do we have that in this year? So, yeah,
Yeah,
Nick,
I
how
and
many
think,
times did I use that as my over under?
and I can't believe, now the season's over, he only has 2 rushing touchdowns. I didn't realize it was
Yeah.
that low. Like, my God. Yeah, it's and every week we hear it, oh, that's on me. I need to put him in the game plan more. Yeah, it's just not the way the game script went. It's like just the same answer on repeat from Matt LaFleur every single week as to
exactly.
why he wasn't used. Um,
So,
yeah,
is there any more else that we want to talk about this game? Because it really is. I struggle talking about this because it was so disappointing that the
yeah.
Packers put up the performance they did in such a clutch game that they needed. Win and you're in. How simple can you get? Win the game, you're in the playoffs. And I
Hmm.
I really bought into the hype that the Packers are the team to beat because once they got hot, they were going to make a run, but they bit me in the ass. So, uh, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's disappointing.
I think despite all of the shit from this game, I think we can pull a few kind of positives. And like, again, I mention this every single week, but Christian Watson is a star. I think we can I can confidently kind of place my faith in him. He was the wide receiver one for this game, and considering if you guys saw Alan Lazard's comments from today, he's he's probably going to be wide receiver one for next year as well. And it's he earned it. He deserves it, and he can do everything. Kind of like the every down running back, he can do everything as a wide receiver, and would have only just scratched the surface of what he can really be in this offense. So I'm very excited for that. And I think if we take a moment here to kind of talk about this, the whole rookie class in general. Despite kind of what happened with those penalties late in the game with Clay Walker, I thought that he was playing his best game of the season on against the Lions. I mean, in a limited role, they kind of figured out, like I said, when he was kind of first drafted, you put him in that Devin White role as a rookie where you just kind of get him to run after the quarterback. You can rush you can play on the line a little bit. He's a physical guy. He's a bigger linebacker. And you can kind of ease him into the coverage things and playing zone. And he played great. I mean, even when he was in coverage, I think he had a pass breakup. And, he's a guy who is a physical presence on the field for better or for worse. And it's nice to see your first pick of the draft actually working out. So, I mean, how do you guys feel about the rookies from this year?
They're doing a lot better than what they were doing earlier in the season. I think a lot of us wrote them off early on because none of them were really producing like we had hoped. Outside of maybe Dobbs, but between him and Watson getting injured, we the rest of them, I mean, Devontae Wyatt was getting to the point where he was a healthy scratch every week. Um, you know, Quay was, was bewildered out there. It seemed like he just couldn't catch on for anything, and The only other one that seemed to be able to do something was Zach Tom, and that was in limited roles because they weren't actually starting him. They were just throwing him out there, for injury relief. So I really have to say they picked up towards the end of the season, which you hope for. When you get a young group of picks in, they're going to have their struggles early on, but you hope they start getting it together more towards the end of the season. And a lot of them were, like you said, Quay, outside of the stupid penalty that he had in the ejection, he was playing pretty lights out. That's another one where I go back to my comments earlier about the Steelers. Wrong time to be doing something like that to a person of a medical staff or a team's medical staff. It'd been different if he would have shoved another player. It would have been different if he shoved a coach. But don't be shoving a guy of the medical staff because people are definitely going to be watching you on that one. And I know
Yeah.
he's come out and said that he had a 3-tweet apology, and he
It
said
was
that
really, really good, actually.
yeah, and he talked to the guy from the Lions staff, and they talked for like half an hour or something like that, and he just profusely apologized. I know Devonte Wyatt has to be kind of thrown in there too because he didn't shove, but he did brush the guy. So I guess he set in with the conversation with the person from the Lions staff when Quay was apologizing. And who was it? I think it was the final dump guys were talking about it. And I never put two and two together, but Devonte and Quay were checking on DeAndre
Yeah.
Swift. They were teammates in Georgia, so they were worried about him being injured. So they were kind of lost in the moment. You have your emotions high, and some guy comes up and tries to push you out of the way. Some things happen. Now that's not an excuse for him, but I can see where it happens. And now I do want to say one thing. I did see somebody tweet CD. I think you responded to him also, where this guy
Yeah.
said that we know these actions he needs to be suspended for a year. And come on, guys, the kid's young. He made a stupid mistake. Yes, it's twice in 1 year he's made the stupid mistake, but he's fully admitted that he runs high on emotions. It's something that they're going to have to temper. It's something that they're going to have to talk about. There's something, this is where I said earlier they need a guy that kicks them in the ass. This would be a perfect moment to have him out there with his ass kicking boots on and kicking his ass all the way through the tunnel saying that was stupid, that was stupid, that was stupid. But suspend him for a year. Those were violent actions. It's not like he pulled a knife from his trunks and started swinging it at the guy. Come on now.
And I will say this, just because I think it was a pretty non-egregious shove from Quay Walker. I understand it's who he pushed, but it sure wasn't violent. It was
No.
it was just this little push. There will be conversations that will be had this offseason with training staffs across the NFL to say, hey, don't shove other players. There's going to be a little bit added protocol because in the end, that trainer did initiate the contact. Whether it was, please, maybe he said, "Please get out of my way, sir," or maybe he didn't. Maybe he just, threw an elbow and went in, and Quay just responded, which was incorrect. He shouldn't have done it, but I will say there will probably be some protocol conversations with training staffs and other people that go onto the field amongst these massive human beings that can give you a little push and probably break a bone. So
Yeah.
let's keep
Yeah.
it safe out there, guys.
Well, let's keep it fair to Quay too. He's worried about, a friend, ex teammate, or whatever, and you see some plainclothes guy come up to you. How many times have we seen guys jump out of the stadium and they're running around in plain clothes out on the field? He didn't know what was going on, heat of the moment. Some plainclothes guy comes up and starts putting his hands on you. You don't know. And like CD just said, it wasn't egregious. There was no malice to it. Again, it's not like he took off his helmet and started swinging it at the guy. So,
I mean, yeah, I mean, we're not even a full week removed from Justin Jefferson literally swinging his helmet into a referee and with what, zero consequence. So, I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
no
it's
kidding.
pretty hard
Wow.
to argue for a full year suspension for
Yeah, I
for
never
that.
connected that, Nick. Wow. That Justin Jefferson hits a ref with the helmet, but we just give a trainer a little push and we're kicked out of the game. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, look, we're basically already talking about it. Let's get into kind of the off-season preview. Where do we go from here? What's next? I mean, look, there's so much to talk about. Off-season, it's a massive thing, but I just want to kind of go through like the rough bones of kind of what's going to happen for next year and kind of where you guys are at with the state of this team. We kind of talked about continuity already. Um, you know, let's just start. We talked about a lot of the bad stuff from this game, and I kind of trying to steer the conversation a little bit. But what are the things that you enjoyed about this season? What things do you think were kind of little highlights or fun moments or fun memories of games you'll think back on in future seasons?
Jair talking all the trash that he did. I'm not going to give up on that because I thought it was great. Because when's the last time you saw somebody on the Packer? Oh, excuse me, had a frog in the throat on that one. Uh, how often or when was the last time you saw somebody from the Packers talk as much trash as Jair did? Some of it was in inopportune times or in bad moments, but it was refreshing to see somebody have that kind of spirit to them. So that one I will um, I love from this season. But other than that, I know this is going to sound bad and this is going to sound weird, but it was just another season to me. It didn't lead anywhere that we had hoped. It was up and down. It was a roller coaster ride, but it really didn't. I guess this is where you can say I'm a spoiled Packers fan because this was just a season.
I'm
It
glad you
wasn't.
said it, so I didn't have to say it.
I fully admit it.
Yeah, God,
I
Joe,
go to
so
meetings
spoiled,
for it.
entitled town.
I go to meetings for it regularly, so but it wasn't like a 3 and what would it be 3-14 season to where we can say this was completely shit. The most we can hope for is just a high draft pick. So I mean I am throwing you under the bus, Dan Kotnick, if you're listening to this. There was no need to throw the season just to get a higher draft pick. So, you know what? On you. um, but I don't know. It was just a season. There were some moments, seeing the emergence of Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs was pretty solid. Like I said, the Jair talking, Bakhtiari coming back, that was great because everybody didn't everybody thought that he was pretty much done. We need to cut ties with him. It's over. He can't play. And to see him go through the season and come out and say hey, it just took a moment for it to click, and when it finally did, you know it was great. But other than that, I really don't have anything else for it because there was no other real highlights for me. It was just another day, another season.
Well, on
Beat
that
that,
note of
guys.
positivity, on one hand, I'll say, we're always going to have Dallas.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
always going to have the Vikings game. That second one, it was such a uh, cathartic win. But you know, to sort of echo you, I won't echo you that much. But you know, how do
Jump
we?
on the train. Jump on the
Yeah, I mean,
train.
how do we remember seasons? I mean, 2011. Do we remember all? Do we sit and think about the 15 wins out of 16? No, we think about the loss in the at home to the Giants. 2014. Do we think about the great plays, or do we remember Brandon Bostic? You know, we remember how seasons ended, and unfortunately, this Lions game is gonna overwrite all the positives that we have, and we can find those memories. We're going to see highlights of those memories. We're going to say, "Oh my gosh, I do remember that game." But yeah, 2022 is going to be remembered for the year that we could have made the playoffs, and we didn't. All we had to do was win. All we had to do was score literally one touchdown at the end of the
Yeah.
game and not throw an interception. And we're in the playoffs. But then who knows where that would have gone? It would have been playing San Francisco. So
That's the truth. What about you, Nick? What are you going to take away from this season? Or are you going to jump on the train and shit on it like we just did?
I mean, look, I think the best part about this season, I think, was kind of a bit of a I think it's kind of been a story that we've all over the league is that kind of changing of the guard. I mean, look at the AFC playoffs right now, right? Patrick Mahomes is the oldest quarterback in the AFC playoffs, and he's only 27. I think this is the perfect kind of example of just this team is it's a period of change, and whether or not the GM and the head coach want to believe it and accept it, it is happening. The fact that we have played and drafted such a first round rookie linebacker and defensive tackle, the fact that these guys are now starters, and Clay Walker is probably going to replace Devondre Campbell in next year or the year after. Christian Watson and the rest of the receiving room is going to be basically entirely brand new next year. Probably 2 out of 3 at least of the tight ends are going to be gone next year. I think for me, it's just kind of the start of a transition, and the highlight for me really was the rookies. I think getting even Kingsley and Agbury in the 5th round, and what a steal that was, and kind of seeing him grow. And this, I think there's no big kind of thing to kind of celebrate, I think, at the end of this season, but it's just nice. It's just really nice to see kind of the growth. And there's not, it was kind of like Joe said before, it was kind of unexpected how well this draft class turned out. And I think it's a great base to build on for the future, and I'm just kind of looking ahead to kind of what comes next. But yeah, I am with you guys though. There wasn't really a heap to celebrate, and at the end of the day, it was a failed season. There's no way around it. It's a failed season, and we're all looking to the future now, right?
Looking at the show notes, because I glance at them now and again, I will say the special teams, the turnaround on special teams, I will say that was a highlight. I think we all had high expectations when they brought Bisaccia in. And then when they kind of weren't doing anything early on, and the whole Amari drama and all that, but they really, but it really turned around. And as much as I wish he would get another shot coaching, I would rather Rich stay on the team and continue building the special teams. And I look forward to it. And I know we're going to get into this a little bit later, but I think we're going to have a big turnaround on special teams. I think we're going to lose some key guys. One mainly being Mason. I think this is Mason's last year. I think he goes out. I think he retires. You could really tell that he was struggling on some of his kicks to get him. Whereas they were chip shots in the past, now they were a little bit more of a struggle to get over the crossbars. So, I will call that a highlight and say I will probably remember that, because this is Keyshawn's touchdown return was the first one since Cobb's in 2011.
Yeah.
So that always is memorable, especially considering I was calling it for 3 weeks straight before he actually did it.
And it's nice that we have there's a legitimate argument that we now have the best kick returner in the league, and statistically he is only playing half the season a kick returner. And that's something that's like practically unheard of for the Packers.
And returning that kick with a gimpy groin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he's not necessarily our kick returner anymore, since he is an unrestricted free agent. So we're going to have to assign him if we want him to be our best kick returner in the league.
This
and I'm
true.
sure we might have a little competition for that.
We might have a little competition, but I don't think his contract's going to necessarily make him the highest paid kick returner in the league. So I
don't know. Have you seen what the Packers do? Come on.
Yeah. It is kind of funny because there's like various points in the past couple seasons where we've had like the best player at multiple positions. I think I look back to 2020, that season where Jaya kind of first broke out. Jaya is the best cornerback in the league at that point. Adrian Amos is playing like a top three safety. Bakhtiari is the best left tackle. Corey Linsley is the best center. Aaron Jones was playing like a top three running back. You have obviously Aaron Rodgers was the MVP at that point. Kenny Clark was playing like a top two defensive tackle at that point. And it's like, you have such this collection of talent. And I guess the hard part about having so much talent on the roster is that you'll have to pay them for how good they are, right?
Well, now this just popped into my head because you brought up the name. And I want to preference this by saying I'm not necessarily calling for his head. But what do we do about Kenny Clark? Because he's a very solid player. He can be one of the best, but he really disappears for large chunks of the time. Does he necessarily warrant the contract that he has, or is there a way that they're going to rework his contract to make it to be a little bit more team friendly? Because let's face it, he's solid, but they're either misusing him or he's not as great as we like to think he is. So, what do you guys think on the Kenny Clark situation?
I mean, look, Kenny's been one of my favorite players in the Packers since he's been drafted, so it's hard for me to kind of take off the Homer glasses. But look, you're not wrong. I think from what I saw, he was just really either injured or kind of unmotivated for a lot of this season. That middle stretch where they were just losing the games, I think it didn't seem to bring the same energy that he had brought in the past and in past seasons. But I think the biggest problem, man, is just that he has no help. Like, it's not his fault that he's so immensely talented, and he also has no help around him because he gets double teamed is basically like a standard snap for him, and triple teamed is also happens quite frequently. It's like you can't expect any player to produce when they're getting the amount of attention that he gets when no one else is getting attention. And if you look at this last 6-week stretch, he's been playing as good as he was in the first stretch of the season. And that's because he does have help, because he has Devontae Wyatt next to him, and because Dean Lowry is not there just chilling out. He has people around him, and the scheme is working for him. The stunts and the twists are there to help him. He's not playing at nose tackle anymore. TJ Slayton's done that in the past 3 games. I think that's kind of more representative of where he's at. I mean, I love Kenny, so I'm never going to argue for him to be gone.
Yeah, I don't know really what you can do with him. We have already pushed his salary out after his contract expires. So, he's going to cost $5.4 million in 2025 when he's no longer with the team, and another 2.7 in 2026 when he's no longer with the team. His cap hit for next year, like dead cap, would be 20 million.
Okay.
And if something happens with Aaron Rodgers where that 40 million ends up going against the cap, you want to talk about unrestricted free agents being your starters.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have a lot of flexibility. I think any flexibility financially you had with Kenny Clark, you've already pushed out into those post-contract years, and I think that's going to become a huge issue for this team over the next couple of years.
Right,
sure.
And because I've always been kind of a Kenny fan. Matter of fact, one of the first mock drafts I ever did was the year that he was drafted, and I basically called him getting drafted at the pick that he did, right on the dot. And a lot of the things that I saw in him coming out pretty much came true. That when he was at UCLA, he was more of a run defender, but he had the ability that if somebody could coach him up, he was going to be a solid pass rusher. And a lot of it's come true. For a guy that has the talent and seems to have the ability, it just seems like the stats aren't there. Now, Nick, you did come up with some good points that, he hasn't had the best crew around him, to help him. And hopefully that fixes itself within the next couple of years. Hopefully Lowry's not going to be brought back. let Devontae be on one side. I did find it interesting that when they were doing the player introductions for the Lions game, they had Slayton listed as defensive end and Kenny Clark listed at nose tackle. So even in those situations, they're putting Kenny in the nose tackle position and putting Slayton out on the end. And I really think that's a mismatch. They needed to flip him and have Slayton be the nose tackle because he is. I've said it for the longest time. He reminds me of a Gilbert Brown type player. He's going to be that nose tackle. He's going to be the guy that eats up the blocks. He's going to be the guy that stuffs the run and allows the other guys around him to succeed in the other elements of the game. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to see Kenny gone, but I'm trying to think of what we can. Or, again, I'm using that royal we. What can be done to either get him to succeed or you know figure out why he's not succeeding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think like it's I think they kind of came on towards the end of the season, but as a position group that was supposed to be mostly revamped this season, I mean, they definitely underperformed, right?
Yeah, and the whole defense was underperforming for the most of the year. So I mean, you can't all put it on Kenny, but it
No,
just
yeah,
when he's supposed to be one of the leaders of the team, you look at him more than you do some of the other guys and expect him to produce more than what he had been.
yeah. Well, I think something I think we should kind of go through here as it's like a big blip on the notes here is the free agents, and who do you think that we really should be re-signing from these free agents? Because I think there's 16 here, some of them restricted, some not. So give me 1 second. I'll quickly just list these all out here, and you can kind of choose who you think. Give me one guy who you think should stick around. So we've got Adrian Amos, Randall Cobb, Dean Lowry, Mason. We've got Alan Lazard. We've got Tunyon. We've got Jaron Reed. Mercedes, Big Dog, Dalen Levitt, Jonathan Ford, the safety. I believe he's on the practice squad, not the guy we drafted this year.
No,
Eric Wilson.
Jonathan Ford is Rudy. Rudy's his middle name,
Okay.
so Rudy Ford.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Eric Wilson, he's mostly a special teamer. Keyshawn Nixon, Tyler Davis, Justin Hollins, Chris Barnes, and Yosh Nyman. So yeah, who do you guys want to keep out of these free agents?
Big Dog. I want that guy to play till he's like 50 years old. But seriously, probably out of that list, I would say if I had to choose one, probably Keyshawn, just because he was that boost for the special teams and the return game. I mean, there's some other ones that I would love to keep, but I just financially, I don't know how it would work. So if I had to choose, my 1A would be Big Dog and my 1B would be Keyshawn. But if I could only select one, it would probably be Keyshawn.
I'd love to keep a lot of these guys, but the Packers are presently working for next year with $3.4 million in cap space. And last I checked, they have to draft players.
Yeah,
So, I have this argument actually with Kelly, my co-host on Cheesehead Radio all the time. She says, "Well, I want to keep this guy," I said, "But it's going to cost money." Oh,
yeah,
so a lot of these guys, I'll be honest, the vast majority of this list are going to go.
yeah,
They're going to have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
because, and especially because it's the Packers and Alan Lazard looking at. He's looking at, just looking at some calculated market values. Lazard's looking to make $11 million a year next year.
yeah,
Adrian Amos is looking to make $7 million next year. Tunyon's going to make 5.2. Yash Nyman is looking to make 3.3 if he were to get an extension or something like that. That salary cap going up goes up for everybody, which
hmm
means every time you get a free agent, all those rates get drastically inflated. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, once again, not to be Mr. Negative, um, if you could squeeze in Keyshawn Nixon to stay at a bonus, that'd be great. That might be the one guy they get to keep off that list.
yeah. And Ken Ingles has us at if all we do starting next season is tender Yosh Nijman, second round tender, and sign the draft class. Like you said, we kind of have to sign the rookies. We're already sitting at 40 million over the cap. So it's like with no adjustments and kind of extensions, cap wizardry, etc. That's kind of where we're at just to start the season. And you also need about at least 10-ish million as like emergency savings. So really, we have about 50-ish million to kind of scrape off the cap for next season. And yeah, I think some of these guys are also it's kind of at the end of their time. Adrian Amos, he's like by all accounts basically cooked physically. Randall Cobb, I think he wanted to retire, and he kind of made that comment about thinking his career was over when he got injured this season. Dean Lowry, I think is also out. Mason, he's going to retire most likely, as we just discussed. I think it really is a short list of the guys that you want to keep around. Besides what you guys have already said, I would really like to see Justin Hollins back. He came on really nice as a kind of third edge rusher there. And if he once Rashawn's back, if he's the fourth behind Kingsley and Preston, and hopefully they draft someone next year, I think he would be a great addition for under 5 million. And you can never have too much edge depth. So I think it'd be that's the only guy that I would also be willing to keep. You guys haven't already covered.
I think Randall is going to depend on Rodgers, because you got to remember, and I know I mentioned it earlier, the only reason why Randall ended up in Green Bay was because Rodgers said, "I want my friend." So if I could see Rodgers pulling that again, saying, "Well, I want to keep Randall around," and I'm sure he could talk Randall into coming back for another year. So that one is up in the air. Otherwise, I know CD said he'd love to keep a lot of the guys on this list. Honestly, I'm the opposite. I think a lot of these guys on the list I could kick to the corner tomorrow and not shed a tear about.
God.
Just because I don't see, Jerron Reed isn't really going to be a world breaker. He was solid for what he was in Green Bay, but if you think about it, if he came back next year, he's going to be a depth piece, because Devontae is in one spot, TJ's in the other spot, and then you got Clark. So he would just be a depth piece. So you're just kind of, with what he's probably going to want in the contract, you're just giving a ton of money to somebody who's going to be a third or fourth stringer. Tunyon, I would love to see Tunyon back, because he seemed to really come on later in the season, after he fully recovered from the ACL. I think Lazard's going to end up in Chicago. I know there were rumors heavily last year that he was going to end up there. I think it's pretty straightforward. He wants to go play with Luke Getsy again. So I really see him in Chicago. Levitt, okay, he's special teamer. Maybe Bisaccia say, I need to keep him. Rudy Ford,
Whatever.
he was good for what he was, but I see him like Rasul and Devondre, where we had this conversation with Todd Varney earlier in the year where, he was playing for his life. He was playing for that next contract, just to be able to stay on a team. So, if they sign him long term, is he going to produce, or is he going to drastically drop off, kind of like Rasul and Devondre did? So, yeah, a lot of these guys on this list, even Yash, with the way Zach Tom kind of stepped up, I think that made Yash expendable. So I really, to be honest, there's not a lot on this list that I won't say I don't care for, because, I always preach Packer family. Once you wear the green and gold, you're pretty much family.
But also tomorrow I could kick them to the side of the street and wouldn't think about it. So,
well, they're definitely not invited for Christmas.
Definitely. Holy cow.
They're not getting a Christmas card from me this year. I tell you that.
It's like the third cousin twice removed that you just don't really want to talk to. That's the Packers family.
Hey man, I don't talk to most of my family anyway, so it would be pretty much same feeling anyway. Might as well be family.
I think the one thing I want to say kind of before we get to the rest of the stuff here is that Rudy Ford, the special teamer, more than happy to have around for a couple bucks. But Rudy Ford, the safety, it's whatever. He's just like a stock standard, slightly below average safety. And just because Darnell Savage was god awful at safety doesn't justify the expense of just paying another one who's also just at the line. But yeah. So, kind of the last thing I want to talk about here is the draft. What positions do you guys want to be targeting for this team in the draft? And who are you kind of interested if you have your eyes on any kind of specific players kind of going into this offseason?
Can I say all of them?
Yeah,
I don't
I
think
like
there's a
Bryce Young. That would be nice.
Well, no, I mean, I could see the Packers needing somebody from every one of the positions on the possible, if you think about it, really, because you'd have to, quarterback would have to be on the list because you have to wonder if maybe they're going to make a trade to move on from Jordan Love if Rodgers comes back. Running back, with Aaron Jones's contract, is he back? Is he not back? And I don't see them running with AJ Dillon as their primary back. And I could go through the whole list, but it'd take me another half hour just to go through the whole list. So I could see the team needing at least one from every position. I know we don't have enough of those draft picks to make that possible.
All
But
the 22 draft picks that they have.
yeah. So, and as for people I'm looking at, I really haven't dug into it yet. I know I've seen early mock drafts saying that Michael Mayer
Yep.
from Notre Dame sounds nice, but I don't know. I haven't really looked at him to say that's it. That's the guy we need. And so, but I think the most glaring need right now would be tight end and probably safety because I have a feeling neither one of the safeties are going to be back next year. I know they signed or they picked up Darnell Savage's fifth-year
Savage kind of
option,
has
but
to be around there. Because I
well,
think it's
I
fully
could see.
guaranteed. It's basically the same as a tag.
So yeah, but I think they'll work something because I have this feeling that he's not going to, or if he is, he's not going to be a starter. That's for sure.
Well, the Packers are drafting 15th, and you know, there was a point in time we were thinking top 10, and that's not just top 10 in the first round. That's top 10 in every round, and that
Right.
that does it does increase the value of what you're getting. So, our 4-game winning streak, may have cost us a tier in the
Mm-hmm.
draft. Um, but you're right. I think it's going to be a situation where Gutekunst has to go in, and maybe he went into that a little bit this year, which is um, the best player available at a position of need. And so, look at what he did. He brought in a linebacker, he brought in a defensive lineman, then traded up to get the wide receiver that everyone was screaming for. I mean, crying, fetal position, tears to get one of those top 4 wide receivers. Well, he got the 5th best one, and he got it at the top of the 2nd round. So he might move around a little bit, but he doesn't have a lot of ammunition unless he decides to trade Aaron Rodgers to Las Vegas for 17 first-round draft picks or something like that. Where it's going to be tough to have that just settled in at 15. And Michael Mayer sounds great. I mean, Big Bob Tunyon, unfortunately, he came back from his surgery and he's a sure target, but as soon as he catches it, he looks like young Forrest Gump with the leg braces. Um, so I don't know if he's gonna be someone who's gonna be resigned.
Now I'm not going to get
Uh,
that picture out of my head.
so
It's so
um,
accurate there.
yeah, but tight ends need sure. I mean, do you use your first rounder on it? I don't know. It's just
Please
really
no.
going to be where it falls and who comes up. And I think you said perfectly, Nick. We're definitely going to need one safety, if not two, and it could be that if the right guy shows up at the right time.
Yeah. I think,
Now,
yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but was the last tight end that the Packers took in the first round Bubba Franks, and that was 2000?
Yeah, that sounds accurate.
Must have been, yeah.
So
Because what?
they haven't taken a first round tight end even longer than they haven't taken a first round wide receiver.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's like it's. I don't know. Tight end is just because there's so few difference, like real difference makers at tight end, and most of those guys don't even come in the first round. I just think that like kind of hedging your bets with such a high draft pick that the Packers do scarcely get is like such a I don't know strange decision. But I also would have said that about drafting a linebacker at 22nd overall. So
Yeah, and Gutekunst has shown that he will think outside the box when it comes to draft picks. I mean,
yeah,
the year Jair was drafted, everybody was for sure saying it was going to be an edge rusher. It was going to be an edge rusher. Or they needed a corner, but it wasn't, I know he came on as a pick later on in a lot of mock drafts, but I don't remember seeing Jair being mentioned at all by a lot of the
yeah,
talking heads when it came to that draft, just because of the height thing. The Packers only picked uh,
the big long
defensive
guys.
backs, yeah, and then they picked him, and everybody's like, "Who the hell is this guy?" Where he's kind of, what the hell's going on here? And and then running backs were kind of the same way. They only take running backs that are, or they only want running backs on their team that are such high and such build. But we got Aaron Jones, and so Gutekunst has shown that he will think outside the box on some of his stuff, and it I in a way I wish it was a higher draft pick just to see what he could do with it. But hey, 15's a lot better than 32 right now.
Yeah,
And just so you know, for I guess completeness of thought, Bubba Franks was the last tight end taken in 2000. Previously, the last tight end before that was Rich McGeorge, taken at number 16 overall in 1970. So
wow.
yeah, so we're not due for another tight end for another 20 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense because the last wide receiver they took was Javon Walker in 2002, and I'm trying to think who was the last wide receiver they took in the first round before that. So maybe
Probably
it's like an every
Sterling.
Yeah, I was gonna
yeah.
say Sterling, right?
So maybe it's
Yeah,
like an every 15, 20 years for that thing too. So
yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it's so interesting. I think I mentioned it earlier in the season on this podcast, but it just feels like with all the kind of bullshit and like the hijinks that goes on with this Packers front office, it really feels like the kind of year where they would just draft Bijan Robertson at 15th overall and just call it a day. Like it just feels like
oh
one of
man,
those years where it's something like it's going to be if it is an offensive player, which I hope it is, it's just going to be some like finally we get that skill position player, and it's like, yeah, it's a running back, or or it's a tight end, or it's just like, it's kind of like exactly what happened with the Clay Walker pick. It was like, yeah, we need a linebacker. It's like, oh, not there. Like, I think that's the perfect year, and it'd be so Packers to just draft a running back.
could you imagine
Oh,
the uproar from
it was bad enough
Packer
with Clay this year.
universe if they took a running back in the first round? Oh, they would have the pitchforks and torches out in a heartbeat, man.
Do you guys know on
Yeah,
Madden, like whenever you create an alternate uniform, and it doesn't matter what you do, whether helmet or colors or whatever you do, the first thing they say is the fans absolutely hate the new uniforms. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. I'm finding that's kind of true with no matter who the
yeah,
Packers draft or where. It doesn't matter. Someone hates it.
Yeah,
Every year, it's
for
like
sure.
Rashawn
yeah,
Gary, what a bust. I'm like, do
Oh,
you guys want to watch him play first? Let's give him a
yeah,
shot, hey?
yeah,
please don't bring that one up. I've had to apologize so many times for the
And
Rashawn
well,
Gary
you should.
yeah.
because
I was such a big Gary fan.
I can't even deny it because there's audio out there of me bashing the Rashawn Gary pick. So I've had to apologize every day since then.
Good.
I was kind of hoping the Jordan Love thing would end up the same way, but it hasn't yet. So,
Yeah, yeah. Fingers crossed.
and what makes the Rashawn Gary one even worse was I praised the Darnell Savage pick.
Ah.
So yeah, I don't like that draft anymore.
It still hurts, that one, Darnell Savage. Oh man, yeah, he did actually have a few nice moments in this game, which I should have mentioned
Mhm.
earlier. But it's kind of nice to see him back in the back, like in the slot, and he feels obviously quite noticeably more comfortable.
But I don't think I think going to Joe Barry. Joe Barry's struggles at the beginning of the year was taking his players and constantly trying to fit him into whatever stupid ass scheme that he was trying to work with at that time. Because
Yep.
we definitely have to use this cover two. We're basically going to run a prevent defense in a zone, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter if you have Jair Alexander. So what you saw happen, especially since the bye week, Joe Barry started fitting his talent and adjusting the scheme around them, which is why you saw Jair able to do what he did against Justin Jefferson, and why you're seeing us take Darnell Savage and put him in the slot because it's where he's better, as opposed to saying, well, no, you got to play safety and then play it this way. So, a little growth from Joe Barry, but you, you could have done this week one, yo.
No
what
kidding,
could
right?
what could have
Yeah.
happened this whole season if you would have done that all season? Who knows? But
He
yeah,
definitely gives the Joe name a bad rep. So
definitely. Luckily, you're redeeming it.
well, I appreciate that one. Yeah, I don't know how well I'm redeeming it. It must be a low bar, but I'm working on it. Well, Nick, do we have anything else to talk about? We probably should let CD get some rest. It is getting pretty late, so
Yeah, I mean, if there's any of your own work that you want to talk about kind of briefly before we finish here, CD, feel absolutely welcome to.
Well, sure. And first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I love what you guys are doing. I love how you guys are bringing on people from the Twitterverse to come on in and do it. Honestly, that's how my podcast started a lot too. We had people come in from Twitter, and then we had some beat writers and things like that too. So it's a great job what you guys are doing here, and I appreciate that. You can find our stuff. My website is at packerstalk.com. And if you go onto our podcast RSS feed, where you want to go, look for Packers Talk, little picture of Vince Lombardi statue. You'll get all of our podcasts, including my own, which is Cheesehead Radio, which you do with Jersey Al Bracco and Kelly Hodgson. We've been doing it since 2010. Give me a follow on Twitter. That's at Tundravision. You can tell I've been on Twitter for a long time because I actually got that name. That was pretty cool. Been on there since 2009. When Nick, how old were you in 2009?
I was at the ripe age of 8.
Oh yes, okay. So you probably didn't get your Twitter handle then. But no, really do appreciate it. Appreciate it being here. Give us a follow, and like I said, I think all Packer podcasts, and we all should be supporting each other. And so glad to be here, and maybe we'll swing by and have you guys on one of our shows this summer too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
it was great having you on, CD. I really appreciate you being here. We always say this to every guest. Anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome. You got an open invite. Just say, hey, I really feel like talking about this today, and you guys are the right guys to be talking about it with. And
Absolutely.
we'll get you on. And it was great talking with you, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, and as always, man, go Pack Go. It's going to be a nice roller coaster of an off season. So that's the good news. We're going to have plenty to talk about.
Well,
Not going to be a boring one at all.
Yeah. Sorry, I started early. As always, guys, you can find us on Twitter at NicholasGRGR and at Iowa_Joe86. Podcast at Outback_Packers. Until next time, see you later.